And there we go.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our eco meeting today. The agenda, Jared copied the agenda into the chat. I'll just go through it real brief before we move on to our guest speakers. So we do have guest speakers today. They are committee members. Zachary and Peyton from MSTE are going to be talking to us about the environmental literacy standards and how they impact all the local education agencies, all of the school districts, basically. Then we're going to move on to our working group priorities. We actually had to submit priorities to the commission since our last meeting. So we'll kind of talk to you about how we came about the ones that we did. And, you know, it's kind of a soft goal. It's not a hard goal, but we had to submit them. So we'll give a great update on the teach-in. There's been a ton of progress, including things like partners and sponsorships and things like that. We'll have, if Laura's on, I'm not sure if she is or not, I didn't see it, but hopefully an OLP report out. And then we can have a bigger discussion about the 2025 recommendations, maybe choose a speaker for the next meeting that fits one that we're delving into. So first, I'd like to turn it over to Zachary and Peyton to learn more about the environmental literacy standards. I'm really excited about this presentation and understanding more about this so that we can incorporate that into our education and outreach materials.
Thanks, Amy. And I'm going to just pass off to Peyton. She's our environmental literacy specialist at the Maryland State Department of Education and true expert on the standards and frameworks.
Thanks so much. So we're going to talk about supporting environmental literacy at all levels with our environmental literacy standards and framework. And I'll do a little introduction, talk about the history of environmental education in Maryland, the creation of the standards and framework, and then some of the framework's features and applications. And hopefully I have some time for questions. So apologize if I kind of breeze through things. As we're going through, all of us as participants at the end of this presentation will be able to communicate the Maryland environmental literacy standards and their history, describe the standards framework and its richness of its elements, and discuss the framework's applications. So, as Zachary said, I'm Peyton Hess, Environmental Literacy Specialist with Maryland State Department of Education. My position happens to be housed in the science branch, which is under the Office of Teaching, Learning, Instructional Programs and Services. So I always like to share that that's my background as a former science educator for over 8 years, although we have a really diverse set of folks who come to environmental literacy education. That just happens to be mine. Our vision of our science branch is so that all students become scientifically and environmentally literate individuals who are skilled, reflective, and empowered to make informed decisions that benefit themselves, their families, and their local and global communities within our increasingly complex and continually changing world. So, diving into environmental education. So when we're talking about environmental ed, we also use the term environmental literacy. So I really think an incredible example of what environmental literacy is from a prior resource called the Environmental Education in the State of, or in Maryland in Public Schools, which was published in 2010. So that states that environmentally literate students understand environmental and physical processes and systems, including human systems, and they are able to analyze global, social, cultural, political, physical, economic, and environmental relationships and weigh various sides of environmental issues to make responsible decisions. And I really like this because it emphasizes how many different types of literacy are involved in environmental literacy. So it's not only being scientifically literate when an individual is environmentally literate, but there's also the economic, political, cultural aspects that feed into it. And you can go on and on. Environmental education is not brand new in the state of Maryland. We actually have school systems or LEAs or local education agencies that began their efforts in environmental education as early as the 1950s. In the 60s and 70s, we had several LEAs that opened outdoor schools or environmental education centers. And so we're educating students outdoors about the environment during the school day. In 1989, that's when the state of Maryland set the requirement for all students to experience comprehensive multidisciplinary programs of environmental education. And it had 5 goals stated, which are kind of like the precursor to the standards. In 2009, the environmental literacy standards were first adopted. And then 2011, there was the requirement for environmental literacy for graduation. In 2018, there was a stakeholder survey that was distributed, and it determined that there was a need to revise the environmental literacy standards. So that process started. So from 2018 to 2019, there was a standards review committee that met, and they determined that the prior environmental literacy standards needed to be revised to remove redundancy with content standards and really focus in on what's essential about environmental literacy, so that the standards now are really content agnostic, meaning that they can apply to multiple content areas. And during the revision process, it also became clear that a framework needed to be developed to accompany and support the standards. Right, we wanted to go beyond just the one sentence statement. So then, after the standards were officially adopted in 2020, the framework started to be developed, and it was released in 2023. And I'm going to go over our 5 standards. So these environmental literacy standards include that students will be investigating environmental issues in order to develop and implement local actions that protect, sustain, or restore the natural environment. So that's the first standard on issue investigation and action. The second standard is human dependence on Earth systems and natural resources, where students construct and apply understanding of how Earth systems and natural resources support human existence. The third standard is the environmental impact of human activity, where students construct and apply understanding of the environmental impact of human activities on Earth systems and resources. The fourth standard is the consequences of environmental change on human health and well-being, where students construct and apply understanding of the consequences of human-induced environmental change on individual and collective health and well-being. And then the last standard is individual and collective responses to environmental change, where students construct and apply understanding of individual, collective, and societal responses to human-induced environmental change. Before I move on from these standards, I did want to acknowledge that when we use the phrase environmental change or environmental issue, this, of course, is inclusive of climate change. I know that this group is particularly focused on climate change, so I want to make sure I voice that. So these standards are included in the Code of Maryland regulations. I included a snippet here. This is not the full set of regulations, but just wanted to talk about some aspects of it. So the program is comprehensive, multidisciplinary. We kind of talked about that and how the standards were reviewed. And the program is infused within current curricular offerings and aligned with the standards. So sometimes there can be a misconception that these requirements mean that students take a separate course about environmental education or environmental literacy, but that isn't necessarily the case. So environmental literacy topics and the standards are infused in a way that's designed by the local education agencies in early, middle, and the high school years. So that's sort of an important aspect of what it looks like in its implementation. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the creation of the framework. So the framework kind of had 2 phases in its development. The first phase was, of course, after the standards were adopted, and there was determined to be that need for an accompanying framework. There were 4 working groups, each broken out by grade band, with about 5 to 6 participants to initially write and draft the framework. This initial phase 1 group was composed of about 72% formal education individuals, 23% from informal education, and about 1% from higher education. So this is really incredible because, as we know, environmental literacy education is not something that only exists within the formal ed space. There's a really incredible partnership that happens between formal and informal education, local government, all kinds of partners to be able to provide environmental ed. So we had that equity of voice element. Phase 2, the framework was refined, feedback was collected, and then appendices were developed. This was possible because of a National Geographic grant that provided some resources to collect additional resources to add to the framework, and also provide that professional learning and mechanism for feedback. So in this refinement, again, there were the 4 working groups for each of the grade bands with 4 to 5 participants. And this set of individuals was from formal education, but there was a focus on incorporating voice across various disciplines. So about 53% of the participants were from science, about 18% from social studies and from technology, respectively, and about 12% from physical education and health. And this was really important because in making the framework content agnostic, right, and applicable and multidisciplinary for all of the standards, we needed to have expertise from various content areas. So hopefully you'll see that reflected in the framework. I know I do. In October and November of 2022, there were 3 feedback sessions which were hosted, where over 70 people from across disciplines attended and provided feedback. And then MSDE also received feedback from our local education agency environmental literacy coordinators. So that's on the background. And now we're going to talk about the framework's features and its applications. So the purpose of the framework is intended to connect those interrelated core concepts for student learning and environmental literacy. It provides this conceptual understanding to guide teacher instruction and student learning. So it's a tool for educators. And it identifies relevant learning outcomes associated with specific grade bands. So it really takes the standards just from those individual statements and provides some additional support for what implementation of environmental literacy can look like. The framework is not a curriculum, though. So at MSDE, we're not requiring a specific curriculum for environmental literacy, but this is a tool that's used to help promote multiple ways in which environmental literacy can be implemented, and really to support, again, that interdisciplinary approach to fostering environmentally literate students. The framework has, for each of the 5 environmental literacy standards, its enduring understandings, its objective statements, essential questions, and then related content standards. And then it has 4 appendices. The grade band progressions, the phenomena for environmental literacy, as well as instructional resources and research supporting environmental literacy. Right now, we're going to highlight 4 of the features: the content standards connections, the grade band progressions, student action, and also environmental justice. So there are content standards connections for each of the environmental literacy standards for science, social studies, English language arts and literacy, mathematics, and health education. We've gotten the question, well, why didn't you add more standards like art? we were limited by space. We could have gone more, right? We definitely see that these standards can be connected to all areas of study in some capacity. But this was, a jumping off point. And I do want to also note that they're examples. So it's not, necessarily including every single standard that would possibly connect, but it's a jumping off point for providing those connections. And some applications of the content standards connections, well, really emphasizing that broader connection for who we consider to be environmental literacy educators. And it also helps to facilitate that interdisciplinary nature of environmental literacy instruction. Some really great connections, for example, between sciences and health, right? I can see what are some suggested connections that are related to a specific topic within the ELIT standards, and that can help me really drive home some of those connections, as well as reach out to other educators from other content areas. So here's an example of what that can look like. So this is for Standard 2, constructing and applying understanding of Earth systems and natural resources support of human existence. And yeah, you can see there's a lot that's offered there. I do want to shout out the high school Earth Space Science 2-4, one of the content standards that connects to climate change. So a specific shout out there, but you can see that there's a lot to go off of. So there's really can be a lot of help in terms of options for connections. Okay, the next feature I'll be touching on is the grade band progressions. So this is in Appendix A, and there are grade band progressions for enduring understanding, objective statements, and essential questions. And I find these are my favorite of the appendices. I find they can be really useful for practitioners. Some examples can be with comparing developmentally appropriate examples at multiple levels, and potentially even use as a self-assessment tool for determining the rigor of one's own instruction program or curricula. And we're actually going to use a couple of grade band progressions to highlight two of our other features. Okay. Our next topic that's really helpful, a little goofy in terms of the order there. Next topic or feature of the framework that's really helpful is student action. So we were very inspired by the MIWI model. So if you haven't heard of a MIWI, it's a meaningful watershed educational experience. Maryland is committed to ensuring that students have the opportunity to participate in a MIWI in elementary, middle, and high school. And we have signed on to the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement, which is the impetus of that commitment. And we took the MIWI model and we really infused it into the standards. So standards 1 and 5 are really strongly connected to student action. And some pieces about a MIWI, if you have not heard about it, it is a learner-centered experience. Students are using the inquiry process and conduct investigations both inside their classrooms and in the outdoor environment. And they're looking into local environmental issues that lead to informed action and civic engagement. It's completely infused into the scope and sequence of the curriculum and anchored to standards, not only the environmental literacy standards, but other content standards as well. So it's really integrated into that classroom. And there's a strong local context. So that could be, the schoolyard, the student's neighborhood, town, or community. And it really helps to establish the life relevancy of the issue, the problem, or the phenomena being studied. And a MIWI is sustained. It's different from a standalone field trip because it involves a variety of rich learning opportunities spread over one or even multiple units. And here is a grade band progression for standard 1 of the objective statements. It happens to be on page 43 of the framework. And even visually, you can really see that there's quite a difference between what this looks like, what student action looks like in the early grades versus later on. But a key point of this that I want to address is that student action is possible at all levels of education, as long as there's appropriate level of support and scaffolding for students. And of course, it's really vital to employ student action at the appropriate level of rigor, right? If you're thinking about at the high school level, making sure that it reflects a level of rigor for that developmental group. Okay. The last piece, we're going to talk about environmental justice together. So I am curious about this group's knowledge and how they would define environmental justice and how you consider environmental justice to connect to either environmental literacy, environmental education, or your current practice. So I'll give a moment for some think time, and then we can have some folks type in the chat or even come off mute. So I'll give a little bit of think time. And then if you're ready to, you can respond in the chat, or if somebody wants to come off mute and share, I would welcome that.
Well, I mean, from a social aspect, I mean, environmental justice is, fair treatment. And there is a history of underserved communities not receiving that fair treatment, for being further underserved in terms of environmental action and environmental support. I mean, the company that I work for, we do environmental remediation. We see this all the time. This is, a part of the efforts to improve this. So, I mean, I would hope that the framework tackles that from a social studies perspective. The realities of it. Obviously, in the upper grade bands, I don't obviously not appropriate for under second grade.
Yes, you're just setting me up perfectly.
Okay.
Absolutely. So in Maryland, we do have a definition of environmental justice. It's defined as equal protection from environmental and public health hazards for all people, regardless of race, income, culture, and social status. Of course, we also know that age is a factor here as well, that young people are disproportionately impacted by environmental health hazards. The image that's on the screen is from the EPA's Climate Change and Children's Health and Wellbeing in the U.S., a publication that's still available online. And yes, and it recognizes some factors in the environment that impact children. And of course, when we're thinking about environmental justice, I think it's really helpful to remind folks that the environment is not just when we think about, land, water, air. It's also our interaction with those things, where we are living, playing, learning, and growing as people. And environmental justice is embedded within the framework. It is explicitly embedded in grade bands 6 through 8 and 9 through 12 in several standards, but especially in standards 4 and 5, where we're talking about human health and well-being, and then individual and collective responses to environmental change. And I will say that a lot of times when I have talked about this topic with educators, they might say, well, that's something that, is done by the government. I don't address that in my classroom. And then when we talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, wait, I do this. I do talk about these things. So there's not always necessarily the connection between the two, but really some overall themes that about why these topics and educating for environmental justice is so important, is that it can be a really powerful empowerment for educators to facilitate deeper discussion and learning and student action. And it really does reflect authentic learning about current environmental issues that matter to students, right? Because they may be something that impacts them or their community or loved ones. And then on the screen, here's a from the Appendix A grade band progression again for Standard 5 about individual and collective responses to environmental change. And I'll just leave a moment to read maybe a few questions for you guys. And as you're reading along, sort of hoping to point out, oh yes, and this is on page 52, that although like the terms environmental justice, environmental racism, just like climate change, those aren't explicitly used in the early grades. I've heard from my colleagues that, it's all love until 4th or 5th grade. These times are still really foundational for setting up essential knowledge, approaches, and that really foundational background to support their later learning. And I think it can be really impactful to peruse the framework, and you can see some of these questions that really make these really broad, sort of nebulous concepts more concrete in terms of, oh my goodness, environmental justice seems really big. And some of these questions feel very reasonable and approachable, and may already be really reflected in curricular resources from across the state. So I know I kind of had a lot that I built into there. I know we're kind of at our 30-minute mark, but my contact information is up there. The QR code is for our environmental literacy webpage, and I'll throw that into the link, or I'm sorry, I'll throw that link into the chat for your information.
Awesome presentation, Peyton. I learned so much. That's amazing. I have a couple questions related to the teach-in, and I'm sure there are others that have questions too, but I'll just kick us off and get us started. So would it be helpful as we, do outreach to teachers if we took the resources that we had, specifically the lesson plans or the examples that other teachers have given us, and match them up to the 5 standards? Would that assist teachers in kind of foreseeing how this applies, or no?
I think it definitely could apply. It could be useful for folks, to make those connections. And I especially when we've talked with our LEA folks about the connections with the standards, that not only the environmental literacy standards, but the content standards can be super duper helpful. And so I think that it could be a useful resource, especially for sort of reaching other groups as well, beyond science, because obviously we know like climate is in the standards for science, but pointing to some of the areas where it's also related in other content areas might be really helpful for folks.
Okay, that's great. And those standards, do they apply statewide just to public education, or they also apply to private schools?
I think that independent schools have some different, different priorities,
right?
But still could be a useful.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have questions about the environmental literacy standards?
I do have a question, but first of all, a great presentation, Peyton. And like Amy said, I actually learned a lot too. We didn't learn all this when I was in school. We didn't have these, most of these concepts we didn't really, were concentrating on. And it's actually very good to know that there is a standard for environmental justice, I should say. And I think it's important to note that even if we solve climate change, there's still the question of environmental injustice. And so it's good that they're talking about that at all levels. because climate change, of course, that's huge scale, not going to solve that right away anyway. But, you know, even if we're looking at those solutions, you're still kind of leaving out another aspect. And so to those who say, well, you know, should we teach them in our classes? Yes, because we know it's not going to be done on the federal level, at least not right now. So it's like Maryland is a leader in this. I'm pretty certain most states are probably not doing this.
Yeah, Maryland is definitely very well positioned in this area and has been a leader in the field. You know, we were very fortunate to be able to present about the framework at the at NAAE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, and you know, got a lot of positive feedback from across the country, really, and saying, "Oh my goodness, I can use this in my other state, even though we don't have these."
Right.
And yeah, so there's definitely some states that are similar in sort of the direction, but yeah, we're very lucky in Maryland that this has been a priority, and it's been something that there's been a lot of momentum for decades.
Great.
Mhm.
Now, notice on one of the slides, and I realize the Department of Education is really focused on the primary level, but there was one of the slides where I think it was like 1% participation from higher education. Is that because higher education is not really supposed to be included? I mean, was that by design, or do you know why there's such a small amount?
I don't know why it was a small amount. I don't think it was intentional. I think that, of course, we very much value the perspective of higher education. I wasn't with MSTE during that particular time, so I can't comment on necessarily the factors that led to that. But yes, it is a framework that's for pre-K through 12.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Laura?
We have worked and struggled, Jabari, to get higher ed involved in pre-service teaching because our teachers are not environmentally literate. Even though as a community within the environmental education community, we do work to expand that knowledge and information. And the framework, I think, helps a lot in terms of understanding and using. One comment I had, Peyton, was that when the standards were refreshed in 2019, the process took a little while, but anyway, that they reduced the number of standards from 8 to 5. And part of that was because, and they specifically took out some of the climate change language because the next generation science standards contained those. And that's probably not terribly interested for anyone, but it's just something that I know. But I found it interesting, your description of using the environmental literacy standards within the context of climate change and EJ, even though they aren't explicitly mentioned. So I think that's helpful for me, just in terms of how I speak about it and how I use it. I mean, I can see connections all the time, but I think sometimes it's hard if it's not there explicitly, right?
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. Oh, and then there was one other comment, and that is, maybe I missed this, and I apologize if I'm repeating something, but yes, the COMAR is infused so that it goes across curriculum, which is amazing and really important to know that it's not just science, but there's also a graduation requirement tied to it. And our students are supposed to be graduating environmentally literate. And it's one of the tools that we use in trying to get school districts and personnel in school districts to really understand and prioritize and look at environmental education. And okay, so I'll now just plug a little bit, but the Maryland Green Schools program, we do ask in our objective 1 that schools show how it's integrated across curriculum. And we get lots of really fantastic examples from English and music and even PE, where environmental education, environmental literacy concepts have been introduced in those curriculum areas. Language is another one. So anyway, thank you, Peyton. Lovely. Really nice to hear your presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, and I popped in if anybody else is sort of like a Comar nerd or policy nerd, the link, and it's just a search of the term environmental literacy, and you can see the 3 areas where it comes up, which includes the area that I'm referencing like this, like I'm in the Brady Bunch, which Laura had referenced.
I just want to jump on a second, and I think some of Laura's comments about the history of environmental literacy and how some of those things happened, and some of the changes that are made to the standards really highlights kind of the complex ecosystem that we have in the state. Laura, I'm a little surprised that you're not talking more about the other kind of requirements with Chesapeake Bay agreement and those things, and how those kind of normalize MeWes, which are not necessarily within our standards, but something that we really value within the state. I think too, with that comment about the removal of climate change specific language from those standards, we get this question all the time. And I know Peyton said it, I know you kind of like highlighted this, but I just want to like double down that our framework does highlight those specific standards that are grade level and age appropriate in middle school and high school that meet that need, and also kind of the kind of tertiary or places where climate change related standards, maybe not by name but by need, in terms of building students' skills and capacity and sense making, lead up to that. And so those are all critical parts. And so it's just really important when we're talking about our standards and frameworks to know that, you know, all of these things are addressed clearly within the framework, and kind of our continued understanding of what environmental literacy is lets us know that, you know, what is most important to kids and communities is very local, and those standards are inclusive of all those things, whether it be environmental justice, whether it be climate change, but that the big arc there is students recognizing the impact of their environment and natural resources around them, the impact that is had on them, and ultimately taking action. So great job, Peyton.
Okay, any other questions? Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, both once we get to the teach-in, and also when we have our kind of subcommittee meetings with the teach-in and the kickoff. But that was great. I learned a lot. I'm excited. I'm so excited for Maryland that, again, just like Jabari said, we didn't learn this when I was a kid. So it's great to see. All right, well, shall we move on to our next agenda item? Jabari, you were going to take the lead on this one, I think. We were going to talk about the priorities and kind of how we came up with them.
Yep. So as a matter of fact, do I need to share my screen with the slides, or do you have those by any chance, Jared?
If you've got them up, you can go for it.
I do. So yeah, let me just see if I can share my screen. I hope this works. Are y'all seeing it?
Yep.
Okay. So, by the way, I did notice, Amy, I think we have the wrong year, but we'll change that. That's minor.
Yeah, and that got changed in the final.
It did. Okay. So
Yeah,
then this may not be the final that I'm working on, but hopefully it's not anything, you know, major.
Yeah.
But so we have priorities and we have recommendations. So the priorities are more of a new thing. And the last meeting, our last steering committee of the year, basically the steering committee asked for the working chairs to come up with or prepare a list of 2025 priorities with accompanying slides, which of course we created the the template. I don't know if it was Amy or Jared. I can't take the credit. One of you all did that, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yep. Because of course, eco, we do it all. So and so these are some of our priorities for the for this year. Basically, it's just three main priorities. The first one is to increase agency support of the Maryland Climate Teach-In.
Oh, change your slides. I can only see the
Oh,
cover.
they did change for me. So let me see if I can.
Oh, I think you're sharing the window that you're not presenting in. It's I can see like the thumbnails on the left-hand side.
Of course, that would happen. Let me see if I can change this. I might have to end it and try it again.
We can see the next slide now.
There you go.
You can? Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't. All right. So anyway, I'll just look at my screen over here then. So I might have to click on each individual one. Just
Yeah, I think
let
so.
me know. Of course, you all know now the Maryland Climate Teach-In has become almost a cornerstone of one of our largest, probably is our largest activity for our working group. We literally work on this from the planning phase to the implementation phase about 3/4 of the year, about maybe 8 months roughly. So we want to make sure we increase agency support of this because this is a larger event. We're trying to get it, we're trying to increase this statewide. So, we definitely need some support for that. The second one would be grant programs for grassroots and education to try to obtain some sponsors, those who could actually pay for some of the activities that we're trying to do. And then the third thing is to expand the website. Of course, we know the website is the primary way and means that many people obtain information. So we want to expand the Maryland Commission on Climate Change website to make sure we're aggregating all the resources for Marylanders.
And we put some, on the slides that follow, it's basically about each one. We put some possible areas to focus on. There you go. There's
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So I mean, I know you all can read. But these are pretty much the just the points for each priority. And of course, we want to start integrating the Teacher of the Year, our Green Schools, and the Green Award recipients, which we have already been doing. Identify resources for teachers. Make sure we're continuing to coordinate with the Outdoor Learning Partnership. Identify outreach to sponsors, and basically just increase participation through the outreach methods. And by the way, you all let me know if you have any questions or anything. I'm kind of trying to click on to make sure. Priority 2, of course, the grant programs. This was actually suggested by one of the commissioners, Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi. And the second one is to create or work with NGO to non-government organization to create or administer a grant program to culturally component grassroots groups to hold resource fairs, education, events, etc.
I think that's supposed to say competent.
Yeah.
It's supposed to say what now?
Instead of component, I think it's probably supposed to say competent.
Program to culturally
or competent, like they are culturally competent.
Definitely makes more sense. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. See, last one. Again, talking about expanding the website, just developing an aggregated list of resources for residents. We want to build pages that will display the links and information in an easily readable way. Suggesting maintenance strategies to keep the website up to date. That's one of the things we've been struggling with off and on, is to make sure we have someone or a group of people who can actually continue to update the website. Because again, if we are the education component of the work group and the communications component, we want to make sure what we're giving out is up to date. But we ourselves don't have our hands directly on it, so we want to make sure we develop that strategy. And then of course, just continue to work with MDE and other agency staff to share the website pages publicly. So those are pretty much the priorities that we have. I don't know if you have any discussion or questions about that.
Well, and this priority thing is kind of new. I just want to throw that out there. So we're not really sure what this means in terms
Right.
of the commission. I mean, there was no like, oh, blessing, go work on these kind of a thing. Every working group submitted priorities.
Right.
Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel as if the point was to not end up with the crazy amount of recommendations we did this year.
Yeah, for sure. That's a process that's ongoing, but I think we're trying to limit that.
So, I mean, these priorities may or may not end up in recommendations. We don't know yet. They may end up in us, actually doing work, like, for the website, we may do more of that work. Same with the teaching. But then some of them we could have recommendations that come out of these. So we don't really know.
Right. Well, like I said, it's brand new.
Yeah.
So stop sharing my screen now. Are there any questions about the priorities? Or any recommendations you may have? Okay.
Okay.
Everybody likes them. That's good.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, and then if moving on to the next agenda item, which is the teach-in, and let me pull up all my notes because there's so much to talk
A lot
about.
happening.
about the
Yeah.
teach-in. Yeah. So let's see. These are our crazy busy months. These last two and the next two. So we've been kicking our outreach program into full gear. That includes mass emails to our constant contact or our contact list, which is now well over 500 individuals. Having folks register through a SurveyMonkey registration link. So far we have 38 registrants, 37 educators, 38 registrants, which is amazing. We are expanding our registration from previous. Let me find where my thing is. From previous years, we have a whole bunch of new organizations that are registered with us now, including, I'm going up to my pivot table, Johns Hopkins University is new. We have our first registrant from Carroll County Public Schools, which is amazing. We have quite a few more NGOs, the Global Vision Initiative, the American Conservation Coalition, and the Alice Ferguson Foundation. We have our first registrant from Montgomery County Public Schools. So, I mean, we are definitely expanding. We already have 17 from Prince George's County as a, amazing. Props go out to Donald Bell, who has been our longtime Prince George's County champion and really kind of helped us develop the champion-ish program, which leads me to the next part, which is trying to seek champions in other counties. And we are making progress. I was down at the Mayo conference with Laura. Thank you. Graciously had me there. Donald and I presented and we shared an exhibit table with Mace and had amazing discussions with so many people. And we now have 4 possible between that and our outreach programs. And this morning presenting on the MSDE office hour for environmental literacy contacts, we now have 4 possible candidates for county champion. Right now we're pursuing folks in Montgomery, Frederick, Baltimore City, and Caroline County, which is amazing. That's a huge increase. Gosh, if we nail down 1 or 2 of those, that would be phenomenal.
And I mean,
And
just for reference, how many do you think we had around this time last year?
oh, I don't know. Not 37.
Right. I'm thinking 2 to 5, maybe.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we're doing really well. There are a couple soft spots. Towson University is one of our prolific teach-in participants, and we don't have a single registration for there. So I've got to look at those contacts and follow up with them probably personally in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, Prince George's County is going strong. I'm going to look at the list of teachers from last year, check their employment status, and then follow up with them to see if they're going to participate again. So, oh, we have a hand up. Alexis.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Amy. I'm wondering how active utility companies have been or if they've been invited to the table at all. Okay, sounds good.
I'm not sure that they've actually been invited to the table. We would love to have them.
Sure.
But we've mostly focused on, up until this point, we focused on public schools, private schools, higher education, community groups, and faith-based organizations.
Okay.
So just in our direct campaigning.
Mhm.
So, we maintain mailing lists of them. Anybody is welcome to this table.
Sure.
If you want to share the information, We are starting to partner with organizations. Again, Mayo has been a wonderful partner, but MACE is going to include us in their newsletter. The Youth Climate Institute is incorporating us into their newsletter. So, I mean, we're happy to develop things. MDNR is going to include us in their climate education newsletter in March. I just have to give them materials. So, I mean, lots of, we'll any way we can get the word out, we would be more than happy to.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And we've changed a little bit. So we talked, I don't remember if we talked about this at the last meeting or not. I think we did. We talked about sponsorships and possibly getting some organizations to sponsor. And we have made progress and we have success. We have donations from one philanthropic organization. It's Jennifer Mizrahi's foundation. She donated $2,500 to the cause, and my company has donated $500 to the cause. Those dollars, we've talked with Laura about funneling them through Mayo. So because Maryland Commission on Climate Change doesn't have an account. We're not a physical, we're not a formal organization. We don't have a bank account. So we needed somebody that actually had a bank account. And we've been working on legal language, which I sent to Laura, I think last week. And we also got some physical donations and some commitment for physical donations for educational materials, or even like I got a commitment for air quality monitors that are right now being used in Prince George's County by educators, things like that. So we're excited to be able to offer some more tangible prizes this year. Hopefully those will encourage folks to join with us. In fact, yeah, I just saw an email come over about the MDNR newsletter. What else do we have? And Jared has made progress with the governor's office for the proclamation the official proclamation that we give out that week. And we have a kickoff scheduled on April 14th at the Cecil School of Technology, Cecil County School of Technology.
County School of Technology.
Yeah, through our spokesperson, who is Brittany Rigdon. She's the Cecil County Teacher of the Year. She's a horticulture teacher. She's very excited to talk about the connection between farming and climate change, which is awesome because again, we're like last year was the connection between climate change and wellness. So I mean, it's great to just not be in that traditional just science teacher realm. And getting outside that box a little bit through the spokespeople. And the kickoff events, I wasn't on the last meeting, so you guys might want to update on it. But I mean, it's going to be much larger than last year's, like 100 students, it sounds like. So really, really amazing progress. Any questions on the teaching? Yeah, Laura.
I was going to say the thing that I find really exciting as well, and kind of dovetails with what Peyton was talking about. The CTE school, which is the technical training school. They're not going to focus on one department, but have multiple departments. So that cross-curricular kind of area in terms of the students, and the students also come from all over Cecil County to that school for special training. So they then go back to their schools having had this experience. So that's really exciting.
Right, because they have what, 23 or 27 different programs there, and they're going to pull students from all of them. So not just horticulture, which is amazing. Yeah, it's very, very, very exciting. Am I missing anything? That was a lot. And we have new materials. I just did an FAQ that I have a bunch of updates that I need to do to the website. We're on email 3 at this point. Jared, did that go out? Email 3? Or is that going out this week?
We have not sent out email 3 yet, but it can be sent out.
Yeah, we should go ahead and get email 3 out, and then I'll start working on email 4. Right now, Jared, Jabari, and I have split up the list of LEA environmental literacy contacts for follow-up individually. So instead of sending a mass email, now we're sending individual emails, which sometimes gets better. I've also left voicemails for a few of the ones that I can actually find phone numbers for. you know, nobody makes phone calls anymore, so it's really hard to find phone numbers for people. But we'll keep going. So, I think that's it for the teaching. Okay, and all right, so next on the agenda, Laura, anything new from the Outdoor Learning Partnership?
The next meeting are you going to do this, Zachary?
We can tag team it if you want to. If you want to start, I feel like we started the standards and frameworks. Go ahead.
So yeah, it's exciting. Zachary is one of the leads on that for MSDE, and then DNR. They co-chair. And we're getting ready in this next month to do our committee meetings, our first committee meetings. And I am a co-chair on the Sustainable Schools one. The Environmental Literacy Committee met earlier today. So things are moving forward, and I think there'll be more to report as the year moves along. But it's really good, and a lot of good collaboration. Some new partners that have come in as part of the executive order, but then also new partners in terms of organizations that hadn't been participating in a while. So, yep.
That's great.
Go ahead, Zach.
Anything else there?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I can add is those working groups that have kicked off just tremendous work in partnership with the Department of Natural Resources, particularly Peyton, who was on the call earlier today, and Olivia Wisner, who have been really hard at work to coordinate 5 working groups. So just a lot of meetings happening, a lot of great work, and excited to see what the year holds.
Oh, and Olivia's the person I'm coordinating with for the MDNR newsletter. So that's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's myself and Stephanie Tuckfield are serving as co-chairs as designees of our agency leadership, and then Peyton and Olivia are serving as coordinators and particularly focused on that work of supporting the working groups. Each of those working groups has 2 co-chairs that are typically independent. I think in every case are independent of MSDE and the Department of Natural Resources. So they've just been working incredibly hard to onboard those folks, make sure that things like agendas and meeting materials are in line and getting posted. But it's just been really incredible thinking about, about 10 months ago or so, the executive order was signed, and it was kind of a mad dash getting everything going. And now seeing real work and hearing good things from those folks in those working groups. So that's great.
That's awesome. All right. So that takes us to talking about our 2025 recommendations. And obviously we have the 3 focus areas. Which is the teach-in, community grassroots outreach through grants and website aggregation. Is there any, I don't know, Jabari, how do you want to start moving forward with these? You want to pick one per meeting? I mean, we don't have a lot of time before we're going to have recommendations due in August. We only have a couple meetings. So any thoughts on the best way to tackle some of these, or start considering what our approach would be for that?
Yeah, I say let's tackle one at a time.
Okay.
Just do it that way.
Well, since we spent so much time talking about the environmental literacy standards, I think today's a good day to talk about the teach-in.
Yeah.
And how we can improve that for next year. We're still, every year we're doing better. I'm really hopeful for this year that we're going to beat last year's numbers. We have so much more coordination with Mayo and MSDE this year. can't imagine how that won't improve our numbers. I am curious about, I mean, one thing that we haven't talked about is, or focused on is like community-based organizations or higher eds and how to reach out to them. So those are areas that we could speak about, and how to coordinate with organizations that support them, or are there other professional organizations we want to coordinate with? And Jared has his hand up.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the timing of the teach-in, and we
Mhm.
discussed earlier in the meeting today about how that conflicts with student spring breaks and also the state tests that conflict with that. And we're offering a great deal of flexibility to educators to participate in the teach-in on either side of the week that we've chosen. Now, understanding that we're doing this in conjunction with Bard College and they have their own timeline that they've set, have we considered just making it? I mean, it's within Earth Month, just making it Climate Education Month as opposed to focusing on the week, because the week seems to be a holdup for some people. They're concerned about whether or not they can do it in that week, and then there's a lot of conversation about how they can get around that. If we just made it the whole month next year,
Mhm.
then would that save some trouble and also give some greater flexibility without having to ask for it?
Well,
Yeah.
that's a good question, Jared. I know even here at Bowie State, when I started here, I started off, it was Earth Day went to Earth Day went to Earth Days, because we weren't celebrating everything in one day. And then that became Earth Week. And then maybe a couple of years ago, we changed it to Earth Month,
Right.
because we were spreading out. We realized, I realized, because again, I'm a one-man office, that trying to, consolidate all of these events into 1 week was too much for me. So I said, let's spread it out throughout the entire month, because now a lot of people are referencing the entire month of April as Earth Month.
Mhm.
So it's a good point. Now, I think the only question would be, would we still be able to tie this into the worldwide teach-in, if we did it that way? Or, I mean, I know the Maryland climate teach-in is separate, but it's also still included.
We coordinate with it. Basically, we provide them our data so
Mhm.
that, because up until this year, we've followed their kind of protocol with it.
Right.
We'd have to talk to Bard. I did reach out to David Blackstein after Mayo, because one of the teachers I met at the booth had reached out to her personally and had a conversation, and it was really, really cool. And she was just like, say hi to him. So I used that as an opportunity to kind of touch base with him again and throw some stuff out there. And also because Susan did all that data coordination and we have no idea what's needed. So it was a great opportunity to find out, like, what do you need from us this year? How can we make this better? And he's going to send me a spreadsheet and things like that we can, make the coordination work better. Also, they provide participants with a certificate. So we're going to kind of work together to do that instead of just, with providing two. Doesn't make sense. So I think we could schedule a call or even just do it via email with him and check in.
Yeah, there's no reason to leave Bard behind. We've done this through them, but I think that, we should coordinate with them where it makes sense, and then, make the most of the teaching in Maryland in the way that it makes sense for us. I mean, looking at their website, they have a different week than we have chosen anyway. We're a week after their week.
They always do the first week in April. Always.
Right. So, we're already off their schedule. So if that isn't a problem, then I wouldn't imagine.
What it could be is that whatever we report to them could be just whatever week they have designated, but we're still have our own climate teaching, and we're still going to maybe include the entire month. But as far as, the data that we give to them, we just include the data from that week.
Well, and we have to consider that because we're not collecting that data. We're not just collecting when these individual teach-ins are happening. They're just registered. So if we're going to be doing that, again, it's just a change. It's fine. We can do it. We can figure it out for this year or future years. It's just a change, simple change. Zach and Peyton, how do you feel about that in terms of, overall education administration? Does that make it easier, you think? Or
apologies, can you say the question one more time?
so we're changing out instead of just picking a week, which seems to be a conflict for somebody no matter what we do, switching it over to be people can do something within the month.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw that on the meeting today.
Yeah, exactly. I think more flexibility is better for our districts, and we kind of have that interesting perfect storm where for a lot of districts this year, that week falls on spring break. So, we don't dictate like when spring break is, and it changes from year to year, district to district. So I think more flexibility would be better and would be well received.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great one. Anything else? Are there any other organizations we should be coordinating with, or agencies that we should be coordinating with? Especially from the higher education, Jabari. I mean, we're building relationships. We have a great relationship with Mayo. We're building a relationship with MACE. We're building a relationship with the Youth Climate Institute. Those are, they're great starting points. I expect that the other two to grow.
Yeah, so they're right now, I mean, of course, USM has a group for, I think it's still kind of a mixed group of like facilities directors and sustainability directors. And I think Mark Beck, you're familiar with Mark, probably. And I probably could reach out to him again this year because I'm not sure we've gotten a lot from the higher education institutions yet.
No.
So I think last year he actually sent out an email to the entire listserv, and maybe I'll make sure he does that again.
Yeah.
So that's really the only group that I know as far as a system-wide group.
Okay.
That's really all I know for now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we should be doing, we should think about how many people we're reaching per point of contact. If we can get those more email lists that we can distribute through, we're going to reach way more people than what we've done so far, which is largely just compiling individual contact lists, which is a great way too. But I think that if we can start thinking top down in our outreach, we might be able to have greater impact with less effort.
Yeah, I mean, well, and speaking of top down, I mean, we tried, I don't remember what year, I think it was last year, we tried superintendent down, and that's a struggle.
Yeah.
Everybody's busy, I guess,
right. And we're trying all avenues, so I think we just include all of them. And, I think that's what we need to do to get, more numbers.
I will say that I have learned a few things from my conversations at Mayo and MSDE this morning. So we have to remessage a little bit. Folks seem to think it's an in-person event. So we have to make it clear that it's not that.
Right.
Clearer than it's not that. I just think people just think that's what it is. Like, do I have to register for this? Or do I have to pay for this? Do I have to sign up? What day is it? Those are the kind of questions I was getting. I was like, that's not like that at all. So I do think we need to remessage. And I also think we need to remessage on the flexibility and that educators can use things they're already doing.
Right.
So I'm going to take a step back and look at all of the stuff that we have and see if I can build that in a stronger way. Jared?
Yeah, so I think that our name is part of what is confusing people. When somebody hears about the Maryland Climate Teach-In, that right, it kind of implies a location. So the proclamation that we're getting from the governor is to declare Climate Education Week, right? And we talked about that being a month earlier in the call. So I think that maybe changing our branding to sell ourselves as this is participating in Maryland Climate Education Week might send a clearer message than by calling it the Teach-In. Like, I think that the kickoff is honestly what I would call the Teach-In. Like, I think that we remove kickoff from our syntax altogether. We call that the Teach-In, and then the whole thing is just supporting Maryland Climate Education Week.
Okay.
Okay.
How does anyone else feel about that? Like, I just think that for somebody that doesn't know anything about it, the name might throw you off, and it seems to be doing so for some.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Yeah, it's just so tough.
Yeah.
Well, being 3 years in means that we have established branding. People know that I've already been interacting with it as the Teach-In. So then you have to kind of undo some of your work with those contacts you've already made. And, that's a headache in of itself. But if a lot of folks that are seeing those emails are just immediately turning off because, they think it's just a single day in person they got to attend,
Right.
there's a question of what the return is there, if it's worth it. I think that for next year, it might be. Certainly, it's too late now for 2025.
Right. Okay. But I do think we should talk about that over.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, one thing I want to highlight too, and something that kind of I heard when you were talking today, Amy, on the call, is the idea that like teachers are doing something different, right? That there's like a different activity, which I think is both maybe exciting, like for the community here, but with the focus on having teachers like implementing the curriculum is a bit of a challenge and does make it like a different day. I don't know. So I'm wondering, given that like a district's curriculum hitting the standards that would align with this may not specifically be in that week, if there would be potentially an openness to celebrating activities that happen over the course of the year aligned within the curriculum on that week too. So you could have some schools that participate by, if they want to, having a specific activity, but we're being open and recognizing that we have semesterized program, we have a lot of different models for how a science and environmental literacy program occur. And so this, for some schools, may be a celebration of work that they're doing, but not necessarily a change from the instruction that's happening in that particular week. And you could, that may be a lot more like social media campaign or something. Might be really open. I was thinking about some of the folks that were on the call today, wondering how that lands.
Yeah, that kind of recognition would be cool. It would, to me, it's almost a different piece, right?
Yeah.
So there's the like encouraging climate education, and then there's the recognizing people who are climate education leaders or are, that would be a different piece. The one concern I have about that, I love that idea, except right now, and Jared, I know, feels feisty about this, is we don't have our own social media and, and we have no budget.
Yeah.
Well, here's an idea. So, we're offering prizes, and those prizes are currently set up through the lottery system. So if you're participating, you have just as good a chance of winning that prize as anyone else, which I think for some of the prizes is fine. But if we're offering multiple prizes, we might consider changing some of them to be based upon participation. So we're asking the teachers to then, follow up afterwards with a survey of, here's what I did. Maybe we tie in some of the prizes to those surveys, or maybe you only qualify if you submit the survey.
You are. We are doing that. You're only qualified if you.
Okay, good. But maybe even we identify those people that might receive additional recognition based on those responses.
Yeah. Yeah, that we do pre-qualify, or we use that as a qualifier, just because it's very easy to register something forward-looking and then not do it. So we want to make sure that the people that qualify for the prizes did do something, their plan, whatever. And their feedbacks have been great. Last year, we got a couple sentences from folks on their programs, and it was awesome. But some of that stuff's up on our website right now. So, that was really good stuff. We got photos from others. Like, it was super useful. Like, the value in that was great. Okay. I like these ideas. My head is also spinning because I feel like I've done nothing but the climate teach-in for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Not to add, just another thing to think about. We're coming pretty close, and we still haven't started advertising those prizes. So for next year, for our 2026 teach-in, I think that we might want to try to get a head start on that, so that by the time we start our messaging, we can communicate that out. Because if we sent an email monthly to the same folks, by the third email, they're not going to read it anymore. And if we're only starting to give the good stuff, the prize information in those later emails, we're probably missing people that might have gotten it earlier on.
Mm.
Well, and we had to, just so everybody knows, there's been a necessity to that. We had to work out all the legal language and requirements, which we did. And we got a lawyer to look at them. And then we haven't gotten them posted yet. Once they're posted on the Mayo site, we can really start advertising them. Because and we also need to confirm that they got the check.
Yeah, I want to respond to Jennifer. She asked us that
Yeah.
last week. So I know Laura just hopped off the call, but
Yeah, we need
I'll ping her
that.
again.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
need that answer. Because and once I know that the checks are going, I'll have EA's check taken care of. Because I already kind of created a fake invoice so that, payable to Mayo for it, because that's what I need for our systems. So, okay. Whew. All right, such great ideas for the teaching. I love it.
And let's remember, next year we will attempt to do the climate educate. Well, we may change it to month, but to get Delegate Stein or others back on, trying to get this in the legislature.
I know, I'm still so disappointed about that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm so disappointed about that.
I wanted to ask, I don't know if this may be a good time to move to the next part anyway, but do you want to try to see if we can get him to speak at our next meeting, or is it
I mean,
necessary?
He came to December, right? Or
He did, yeah.
yeah. And then everything he said, he changed his mind on it.
Yeah.
Still so
The next meeting is after the end of the session, so
Right,
he
that's what I
might
was
be
thinking.
available, but they're usually still pretty busy even after session because there's a lot of follow-up. So
Yeah.
it might be easier to get him. Well, we can try, but the meeting
Mhm.
after might be easier.
Okay.
Then that'll be what? June?
I know that the next one's the
That seems so
14th.
far away.
April, right? No, yeah, April.
Yeah, April 14th is the next one, which is right after the date. I'm just checking.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
thought you meant the meeting after that one.
Yeah.
And that one
And
will
they'll
be June.
be June. Yeah.
Right.
that'll
Yeah, the
be-
26th of June,
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
at the end of June. But we can definitely reach out to him. Just
Okay.
noting that his availability might be limited because of session just ending.
Right. Okay.
Okay. One of the things we had talked about related to the teaching that we kind of dropped this year, the ball on, we just didn't have bandwidth, but we talked about a student ambassador program or a student outreach program. Is that something we want to, and again, we need direction from MSDE on this because I don't know how these programs work in terms of working directly with student-led organizations. Would that be a viable option? Is it a viable option? We're just so impressed with Avita and Compostology, and we start learning about these student organizations. They're pretty darn impressive. But I just don't know. I don't even know how that functions for LEA.
Yeah, and then to speak to that a little bit, Amy, that's not something that's in our purview
Okay.
at MSDE. Really, the best points of contact are going for any student group is going to be the LEA environmental literacy supervisors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need these
so-
champions. We need the champions in the districts. Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, like they're going to be the best at understanding, the community involvement. We're a fascinating state with LEAs that range from 7,000 students to over 150,000 students. So our LEA folks are going to be the best at understanding like the groups that are particularly student groups that are active.
Okay. All right. That works. I think that was a suggestion from Paul, wasn't it?
I don't remember him mentioning that, but it sounds like something he'd say. He's a smart guy.
We love our climate corps folks. They're amazing. He's working on getting delegates and a delegate or a senator to the kickoff right now. Awesome.
Oh, I don't think that I haven't forwarded this email to you yet, but I got confirmation from our call this morning that Aaron Landsman will be the Frederick County champion. So we have another champion.
We got one. So we have doubled from last year.
Exactly. Great job.
I will take that and celebrate that. I'm gonna have a glass of wine tonight. That's amazing.
It is.
I'm working really hard on Montgomery County. The gentleman he has a lot on his plate and he's worried about taking on extra. So I'm trying to make it so that it's not a huge lift. That seems to be our big discussion, is that these things don't have to be huge lifts. For Donald, and Donald would be a great person to talk to this, but I don't think he does more than just bring this up during the regular course of his meetings and coordination with teachers. So I don't think he's on the call today, but we should really ask him that and get kind of a better idea from that. The other thing I want to ask Donald to do is he did a great presentation when we were presenting at Mayo. He did a great talk on using the teach-in for all 3 of the Green School objectives, how it fits specifically. That really resonated with Green School coordinators. And we got to document that. We got to document it, because it supports all 3. And he can explain how it does so that they can make sure it's part of their documentation. So, okay.
Should we reach out to him to ask him?
Yeah, we
Send
need
me?
to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
We need to do it. I know he's so busy, but okay. So we're coming to the end of the time. The one thing we didn't talk really about is speaker for the next meeting, and we also need to open for public comment for a few minutes. So we could do both of those at the same time. We can basically open for comment, but also accept any suggestions for speakers for the next meeting. And again, we want to focus on kind of our priorities here. So it would be education related, teach-in, grant program related, or website related information. And I will say that the aggregating the website thing felt really good, but now that a lot of climate data is being stripped off the web, not sure how great that's going to be as a priority. I mean, everything kind of has changed, and the sustainability of that information online is a concern for me. I just want to throw that out there because my organization uses it, and then it's going away. So we know that. So any suggestions for speakers or any other public comment while we are closing out the meeting? There's a screening tool. I'm going to open that. Oh, nice. Very nice. Wow. That's interesting. So this group is preserving that data. That's amazing.
Yes, that's my understanding. I was just emailed it today.
That's great. That's really great. Thank you for that resource. I'm going to share that internally as well. That a lot of folks relied on a lot of that data. So nice. Okay. There's the public workshops in February, March to help municipality. I'm sorry, I'm reading the text. James, I'm reading your text, but please come off mute.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to note that I was dropping that in the chat in case anybody's interested. Department of Transportation is holding a series of workshops where they're basically helping people apply for grants. So we're walking them through the grant application process for a number of grant programs, including the Urban Tree Program, a hiker biker trail funding, transit-oriented development, and some other ones. So if you know of any groups that are interested in those types of things, all the workshops are the same. We're going to have six at various places across the state. They'll all be the same. So it's not like geographically focused. So people are welcome to sign up for those, and hopefully we'll get some people attending and applying. We've had some good success with those types of projects in the past.
Well, let me ask you a question. So, one of the suggestions for one of our topics is developing a grant program for community grassroots outreach, which it sounds like, you guys are kind of you have your own specific to parks and transit-oriented development. And so I'm curious, is that something you could talk to the group about, or would be willing to talk to the group about how that's administered, or through
How
your-
we do grant
yeah,
how we do grant programs.
yeah.
I mean, we can certainly facilitate that. I mean, I can probably, there might be somebody better than me. Let's put it that way. We have an office where we routinely work with municipalities and help them apply for grants, all types of grants, state grants, federal grants.
Mhm.
A lot of them are related to infrastructure grants from the federal government, but some are related to other types of things, like like I say, like these hiker biker projects. We have like 3 different projects that relate to that type of thing. One's called recreational trails, one called transportation alternatives, and the other one is the Kim Lamphere Bikeways program. So I could certainly look into having somebody who works with all of, works with those 3 and maybe a couple of the other ones that are related to environmental matters, and see if we could see if they could, be able to present how, what's available and how we do it.
Yeah, let's further that discussion. We can do it offline because it's almost 4:30. But again, I don't know how much, and Laura may know because she's nonprofit. But I have limited experience with grants. It's not no experience, but for the most part, my company helps municipalities apply for them and then manages those projects. But that's not setting up a grant program. That's not helping people, helping communities apply. We're applying for our client.
Right.
So we'd love to learn more about administering those programs.
Right. And traditionally we found that, most of the applications come from municipalities, city of Salisbury, town of Bel Air, so forth. But we're, trying to encourage other organizations and nonprofits to also look into partnering so that they can maybe be the applicant,
Mhm.
but might be partnering with the municipality, like, maybe the Sierra Club or Chesapeake Bay Foundation or that type of thing. So yeah, I can look into seeing if I can get somebody to speak more intelligently about it than I would, put it that way.
Okay, that'd be great. That again, to try to cover each aspect of our work areas
Mhm.
during the year, and I have a feeling the website's probably going to drop off just because of a lot of different things. But let me do a little research first. So that sounds great. All right, so let's do that. We'll coordinate offline, and thank you everyone for attending. We're done for the day, and we'll see you in a couple months, if not before, for those of you that are heavily involved in the teaching.
Real quick, does
Yeah.
that count as our public comment? Do we
I
need
think
to?
so.
Okay.
No.
Just to make sure we
Vanessa,
cover that.
Jared, that we opened it for public comment?
You open for public comment, and hearing none, I think that
Okay.
you're free to close the meeting.
Great.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Melissa, stay on before we jump off, because you and I are coordinating on the side. I can see in text. So
Okay, I'm going to end the
Thanks,
recording
everybody.
now then.
Have a
Okay.
great day.